Hey there guys, today we're taking a look at World War Z Aftermath running on the i5-1135G7. Now this game was actually recently given away for free by Twitch if you have Twitch Prime, so decided to actually give it a go. Now I wanted to try out the FSR support in the game, but unfortunately I found an issue where I can't switch from DirectX 11 to Vulkan, which is what is required to have both the dynamic resolution scaling and to have FSR enabled. I have tried everything. I have downloaded the game on other systems and I can easily switch over to Vulkan. I can't do that on the Intel system here, and I don't know if that is a Intel specific issue or if it's something specific to this exact laptop model, but I cannot switch from DirectX 11 to Vulkan on it, which is unfortunate because that means that the performance suffers because of the lack of FSR. Now, Vulkan has always been kind of buggy on this game itself, so for a low-end chip, a lot of the times it was just better to run DirectX 11, but FSR is a feature that I really wanted to try out on here and might have actually salvaged the performance at 1080p for this, game, but I could not access it, and I don't know what I can do. If you have a fix for this, please let me know. I would love to try it out. As it stands, I really can't recommend playing this game at 1080p. The performance is just brutal. I mean, right now we're just doing the in-game benchmarks, because that's usually how I start these things. If a game actually has an in-game benchmark, I use that to compare the relative performance between the different resolutions, and from there I kind of decide what is the main thing that I'm going to go into the game and try out first. And so far 1080p has just been to the point where it is completely unplayable. For sure, even 720p has its faults, because you can see the performance isn't amazing. The 1% lows in particular look pretty bad running through the benchmark. And while playing the game, it is kind of noticeable. It doesn't feel as smooth as that average would make you think. But it's actually not a bad experience at 720p. And in fact, I also wish we could use FSR at 720p, because I feel like maybe just the in-game resolution dropping just a tad bit here and there would actually net us a good increase in performance. Although really the performance uplift from FSR at 720p would probably be less noticeable, because of the fact that if you notice throughout most of the benchmark, we were actually very CPU limited. Actually, if you noticed, in both 720p and 1080p, the GPU load was actually not even at 90%. It was below that, which kind of tells you that the CPU is kind of holding back the GPU in some areas, mostly when it comes to just having a lot of zombies on the screen. The experience overall of playing the actual campaign, though, was actually pretty enjoyable at 720p. There would be moments where the FPS would be pretty decently above 60 FPS, but then there would be other moments where things would drop down, and it really just depended on what was going on. A lot of the game, you're going to be kind of just walking around slowly taking out small groups of zombies, and in those situations, the performance is really, really good. It really starts to kind of change when things get more hectic. Even medium-sized groups of enemies aren't necessarily too bad, but there will be sections, usually in those iconic, enemies climbing up a wall situations. That's where there will be so many units on screen that the CPU really starts to struggle. In particular, you can actually really see that in this section where we're dealing with, hordes of enemies coming at us, and the frame rate is really tanking here with just so many enemies on the screen. And again, the GPU is not at 100% load or anything like that, which means that it is the CPU that's holding us back here. Now you might be thinking, well, the CPU only shows 60-70% usage. Well, it's a 4-core 8-thread CPU, which means that if a game isn't really multi-threaded to use all of that, and it can only maximize the use of, let's say, 4 threads, well, that will show up as 50% CPU usage, but you have essentially half your cores at the maximum speed that they can run at, which means that they can be causing a bottleneck here. And that's clearly what's going on here. But the performance is still very, very good. Even in these really intense moments, you're still at a console level experience, and you can get away with playing the entirety of the game like this. Now, overall, I consider this chip paired with this game to be an absolute win. You can definitely get away with playing the game. Yeah, it's not going to be the smoothest experience, but you can definitely play it, and you're definitely going to have a good time doing it. I just wish these like issues with you know, the Vulcan thing get resolved, because it would be so nice to be able to use FSR. Being stuck at, you know, just DirectX 11 is fine for the most part, but really losing out on FSR is kind of a big hit here.